What if the reason you haven't achieved your biggest goal isn't because you aren't working hard enough, but because your brain literally cannot see the opportunities right in front of you?
Right, like they're totally invisible to your nervous system.
Exactly. I mean, imagine standing in the middle of a rushing river. You're pushing tirelessly with every ounce of your physical and mental strength against an endless tide of water.
Oh man, that is such a familiar feeling for so many of us.
It really is. You set these massive goals for yourself. You construct these meticulous, architecturally perfect plans. You wake up early, you put in the hours, and yet,
You find yourself trapped in a cyclical echo.
yes, the exact same relationship frustrations keep surfacing, just bearing different faces, but the same underlying pain.
The same career plateaus block your path.
And the same overwhelming, bone-deep exhaustion settles in at the end of every single cycle of the sun. You're putting in this monumental magnitude of effort, but, the sheer volume of that effort seems to yield a mere fragment of the desired outcome.
It's a profound disconnect. And it's a pain that the overwhelming majority of humanity knows intimately.
Because we're taught right from the dawn of our youth that reality is an external fortress.
We are. We're instructed that the world is this rigid, unyielding structure made of stone and circumstance, and that to survive or thrive, we just have to gather our strength and lay siege to it.
Like we have to conquer the outside world to find peace on the inside.
Exactly. But what if that entire paradigm is fundamentally inverted? What if the universe operates on a completely different set of principles?
Well, that is exactly what we are exploring today. We're stepping away from that illusion of the external fortress.
It's time to dismantle it.
We are embarking on an exploration of how our internal landscape, our neurobiology, our emotional frequency, and the profound silent beliefs we hold about ourselves.
How they literally magnetize our external world.
Yes. Today, we're taking an in-depth look at the foundational mechanics of the human nervous system, the psychology of perception, and the undeniable biological laws that govern how we interact with reality.
The actual science of it.
Right. We're going to answer one massive question. Why do we feel this immense disconnect between the reality we desperately want and the reality we actually wake up to every single time we open our eyes?
Because the environment we experience does not respond to our conscious desires. It responds to our subconscious state of being.
Oh, okay, wait, say that again.
It responds to your subconscious state of being. We operate under this assumption that the physical world is just a series of random chaotic events that happen to us.
And our job is just to react to them.
Right. But reality operates by precise, observable laws of neurobiology and intention.
So it's not random at all.
Not at all. Today, we're going to synthesize the mechanics of this phenomenon. We're going to thoroughly examine the invisible blueprints we're using to construct our lives.
And more importantly, we're going to dissect exactly how to redraw those blueprints so that the external world begins to reflect an internal state of abundance rather than, an internal state of endless struggle.
That's the mission.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very foundation. If our external world is built from the inside out, we have to start by looking at these invisible blueprints. I'm talking about our subconscious narratives.
The stories we don't even know we're telling ourselves.
Exactly. We are constantly receiving a vast constellation of data from our environment. But what I find utterly fascinating is the concept that our most potent environment is not the physical space around us.
That's not the room you're sitting in.
Right. Our most potent environment is our internal emotional state.
Precisely. We often think of our biology as this fixed, rigid thing, a frail physical framework that is simply subject to the random decay of the external world.
Like we're just hardware that can't be easily upgraded.
Yeah, but that is a profound misunderstanding of human anatomy. We are highly responsive, incredibly powerful, soft technology.
Soft technology, I love that term.
It's accurate. Every single thought we have, and more importantly, every emotion we feel, creates a literal chemical cascade within the body. Let's look at the exact mechanism.
Let's do it. Walk me through the biology.
So when you have a thought, a specific part of your brain called the hypothalamus immediately translates that abstract thought into a chemical messenger.
And that messenger is called a neuropeptide, right?
Exactly. So it takes the invisible and turns it into something physical. These neuropeptides are then released into the bloodstream, traveling to every region of your anatomy.
Just flooding the system.
Flooding it. They lock into the receptors on the outside of your cells, fundamentally altering the cell's state. The molecules of emotion just take over.
So if you're having a thought of profound fear or anxiety, Your hypothalamus manufactures a corresponding chemical equivalent.
And within a fleeting moment, your entire physical form is bathed in the chemistry of fear.
That is wild. So, in a very real biological sense, the body acts as the subconscious mind. What we fundamentally believe about ourselves orchestrates the chemical reality of our physical form.
It builds the environment your cells live in.
Which brings us to a really interesting point about the words we speak to others. I want to talk about the actual physical mechanics of speech because I think we take it for granted.
Oh, completely. We rarely think about what speaking actually is.
We take an invisible, abstract thought, something that literally does not exist in the physical dimension, and we push air from our lungs to create physical vibrations.
The acoustic waveforms.
Yes. Words are acoustic waveforms. We transform the invisible into physical vibrations that travel through space to literally touch the skin and vibrate the eardrums of another human being.
It is a remarkable translation of energy, and because of those neuropeptides we just discussed, the acoustic waveforms you produce are heavily saturated with your internal chemical state.
So when you speak, you are fundamentally altering the nervous system of the person listening to you.
You're transmitting a frequency. Your physical vibrations carry the weight of your internal biology.
Yeah, and that transmission is continuous. You are constantly broadcasting a state of being, and the environment around you is constantly matching it.
Always matching it.
But here is the critical distinction. It's not the words themselves that hold the ultimate power. It's the emotional significance. The deep-seated belief that rides on the back of those acoustic waveforms.
This is where people get tripped up.
Right. You can stand in front of a mirror and recite a vast constellation of positive affirmations. You can say the words until your vocal cords are raw.
But if the underlying subconscious narrative is one of unworthiness,
if the body's chemical state is tuned to the frequency of fear or lack,
then the acoustic waveforms of those affirmations are essentially empty. They carry no creative weight whatsoever.
The universe and the people around you, they don't hear your words. They feel your frequency.
That is an exquisite way to phrase it. The underlying belief is the engine, and the words are merely the vehicle.
So if the engine is completely flooded with the chemistry of fear, painting the vehicle a bright, cheerful color will not make it move forward. You're still stranded.
Exactly. You're just sitting in a very pretty broken-down car.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, because I know exactly what the listener is thinking right now.
Let's hear it.
This sounds dangerously close to toxic positivity. It sounds like you're saying we should just ignore our problems.
I can see why it sounds that way, but it's really not.
Let me offer an analogy to explain the pushback. I picture the human nervous system as this highly sensitive, masterful musical instrument. And this instrument is constantly tuning itself to the song of our environment and our experiences.
A very delicate instrument.
Right. But if the song we learn in the dawn of our youth, from our early caregivers, from deep systemic poverty, from genuine trauma, if that song was one of profound scarcity or pain or fear,
the strings get tuned to that frequency.
Exactly. So isn't it naive to think we can just casually decide to sing a different tune and expect the instrument to instantly change its resonance?
It would be naive if that's what we were suggesting.
I mean, if I'm broke and I cannot pay my rent, reciting positive affirmations while standing in an empty apartment isn't going to upregulate my bank account. It's going to get me evicted.
Absolutely.
So how is this not just psychological delusion? The strings of the instrument are already stretched a certain way by real, undeniable trauma.
That is the most important pushback we could possibly address. It's not delusion, and it is certainly not toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Because toxic positivity demands that you ignore your reality.
Right, just paste a smile over it.
Exactly. But what we're discussing requires you to actively confront and rewrite it. You're absolutely correct that the strings are stretched a certain way. This is the reality of epigenetic conditioning.
So the environment literally changes our genetic expression.
It does. For a vast proportion of humanity, the journey begins with deep trauma, heavy conditioning, and a profound sense of limitation.
We inherit stories of victimhood, stories of struggle.
Stories that tell us we're fundamentally flawed. The environment essentially dictates which genes are turned on and which are turned off. If you're raised in an environment of constant threat, your nervous system is permanently tuned to detect danger.
Right. Your baseline is hypervigilance. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. You can't just wish that away. However, the essence of the human nervous system is neuroplasticity.
The brain's ability to reorganize itself.
Yes. To form new neural connections throughout life. It's true that repeating empty affirmations does nothing if the underlying belief remains unchanged. If you are terrified about your rent, ignoring that terror will not save you.
So what's the pivot?
Here is the critical pivot.
Yeah.
If you allow the external environment, the empty apartment, the lack of funds, to dictate your internal emotional state, you are locking your biology into a state of survival.
You're just reacting to the threat.
You are flooding your system with cortisol. And cortisol, from an evolutionary standpoint, shuts down the creative problem-solving centers of your brain.
Because it narrows your focus exclusively to the perceived threat.
Right. If a predator is chasing you, you don't need to be brainstorming a brilliant new business strategy.
You just need to survive the next fleeting moment.
Precisely. The blood is quite literally drained from your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical creative center, and sent to your extremities so you can fight or flee.
But when you're sitting in your apartment panicking about finances, there is no physical predator.
But your biology is responding as if there is. In that state of survival, you physically cannot perceive a new opportunity.
Wow. You literally lose access to the parts of your brain that could fix the problem.
You cannot access the creative thinking required to generate a solution. So retuning the instrument isn't about pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's about shifting your biology out of survival mode so you can actually solve the problem.
Okay, so how do we actually retune the instrument? If the old song of panic is playing on an endless loop, how do we stop it and shift the biology?
We must actively choose to interrupt the cycle. It begins with the radical acceptance of responsibility for our internal state, regardless of external circumstances.
That's a heavy responsibility.
It is, but it's liberating. We have to recognize that while we may not have chosen the initial trauma or the current financial hardship, we hold the absolute power to choose our biological response.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Consider the difference between two types of human experiences when encountering an inspiring message. In one instance, a crowd witnesses a dazzling motivational performance.
Like a really high-energy seminar or something.
Right. They are entertained, their senses are stimulated, they feel a temporary rush of adrenaline. But when the performance ends, they require an external token, a recording, a daily motivational quote, to recreate that fleeting emotional high.
Because their internal baseline hasn't actually shifted.
Exactly. Their actual neural pathways have not changed. They are merely tourists in the land of inspiration.
They visited the emotion, but they didn't take up residence there. They went right back to their baseline of stress the moment they walked out the door.
Precisely. Now contrast that with an ocean of humanity standing before someone who is broadcasting from a place of profound, unshakable truth and radical authenticity.
Someone who is completely embodying their message.
Yes. When that individual's acoustic waveforms, their physical speech vibrations, heavily saturated with the neuropeptides of deep conviction, when those wash over the crowd, they don't just entertain.
What do?
They trigger a phenomenon known as limbic resonance.
Limbic resonance, okay.
The nervous systems of the listeners literally sync with the nervous system of the speaker. The listeners leave that gathering fundamentally transformed.
So their neural pathways have actually begun to rewire.
Yes. They don't need an external token to recreate the feeling because the interaction shifted their internal emotional baseline. They perceive their own potential differently.
And what we're saying is that we possess the power to be that transformative speaker to our own subconscious mind.
That's the key.
We don't have to wait for an external guru. We can generate that limbic resonance internally.
That is exactly the point. You must become the undeniable authority of your own internal environment.
Which is such a powerful shift in perspective.
And that transitions perfectly into the next layer of this exploration. Because if our internal state dictates our biological capacity to perceive solutions, the ultimate question becomes,
how do we move from just feeling better internally to actually causing a tangible shift in the physical reality around us?
right, how do we build the bridge from the invisible to the visible?
This brings us to the core mechanism of how human beings interact with potential. The overwhelming majority of people operate on a fundamentally outdated model of existence.
The old paradigm.
Right. They operate exclusively on the model of cause and effect. They wait for an external event to happen so they can feel an internal emotion.
They wait for the arrival of massive financial abundance to feel secure.
They wait for the physical ailment to disappear to feel whole.
They wait for the perfect relationship to finally feel love.
It's always waiting. They believe the external environment must change first, and only then will their internal chemical state follow.
And what we're revealing today is that this sequence is completely inverted.
It is entirely backward. You cannot attract what you feel separate from. If you are waiting for abundance to feel wealthy, you're currently existing in a state of profound lack.
Your hypothalamus is pumping out the chemistry of lack.
You're broadcasting a frequency of lack. And the environment, acting as a flawless, unbiased mirror, will simply reflect more of that exact same lack back to you.
The new paradigm is not cause and effect. It is causing an effect. We must feel the intensity of the emotion before the environment changes.
Okay, let me jump in here with another scenario because this is a massive mental hurdle for people to get over.
It absolutely is.
It sounds like you're telling me to throw a massive ecstatic victory celebration while I'm still standing at the starting line of a marathon.
That's a great visual.
I mean, I haven't run a single step. My muscles aren't tired, I haven't crossed the finish line, but I'm crying tears of joy and celebrating the victory.
Right.
Doesn't the human brain naturally reject this? If I try to celebrate a harvest when I have only just pushed the seeds into the dirt, might my logical brain step in and say, you are lying to yourself? This is ridiculous.
It appears ridiculous only to the fundamental senses.
The five senses.
Right, which are trained to only believe what they can physically touch and see in the immediate moment.
Yeah.
But when we examine the neurobiology of mental rehearsal, it is not delusion. It is biological upregulation.
Explain that. What does the body actually experience?
Well, the physical vessel, the body, is incredibly objective. It actually cannot differentiate between an emotion generated by an actual physical event in the external environment and an emotion generated by a profound, vividly imagined thought.
Wait, really? The body literally does not know the difference between reality and imagination?
It does not.
That's incredible.
Let me illustrate this with a universally recognized principle of neuroscience. If you take a group of individuals and have them physically practice a complex sequence of finger movements, like playing a piano scale, for a set duration every day.
You'd see changes in their brain, right?
Exactly. You will see a specific expansion in the neural networks of their motor cortex. That is expected.
Sure, because they're physically practicing.
But if you take a second group and you have them merely imagine playing that exact same sequence of finger movements with total mental focus and emotional engagement.
But they never actually move their fingers.
They never lift a finger. Their brain scans will reveal the exact same expansion in the motor cortex.
You're kidding.
I'm not. The brain wired itself as if the physical event had actually occurred.
That is staggering. So the neural hardware upgrades itself based purely on the internal experience.
Precisely. When you pair a crystal clear intention with an elevated emotion, like overwhelming gratitude, profound joy, or absolute certainty.
And you sustain that state.
Yes. Your biology begins to shift to match that future reality. You are no longer waiting for the external environment to signal your genes.
You're signaling them yourself.
You're literally signaling your genes ahead of the environment. You begin to upregulate a vast constellation of genetic and metabolic processes. The brain and the body begin to look and function as though the desired event has already occurred.
So you cease acting out of desperation because you no longer feel a separation from your goal.
Exactly. If you already feel whole, you are not desperately, frantically searching for healing.
If you already feel a deep sense of internal abundance, you're not operating from financial panic.
Because your internal state has shifted from survival to creation, your personality changes.
Right, you make different choices.
You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. And because your personality ultimately creates your personal reality, your external environment must inevitably reorganize itself to match this new biological baseline.
You are no longer waiting for the future. You are remembering your future.
Yes. You have laid down the neurological tracks for it to arrive.
Remembering your future. That is a stunning paradigm shift. It means the emotional blueprint is already laid down, and the body is already living in that reality.
It's a very proactive way to live.
But let's bridge this directly to the physical world because we still have to navigate the chaos of daily life.
We do. We're still in physical bodies.
Right. Once the body is primed by this elevated emotion, once the blueprint is drawn, how does the brain actually navigate the endless noise of the physical world to find the raw materials, the people, the open doors to build that reality?
That is where the brain's internal filtering systems become the absolute masters of your destiny. Specifically, a network called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, working in tandem with the salience network.
Oh, let's break those down clearly.
Yeah.
Because these are the actual biological mechanisms of what people mistakenly call luck.
Oh, luck has nothing to do with it. Let's just look at the sheer volume of data you are immersed in. At any given moment, your fundamental senses are absorbing an endless tide of data points.
Like the temperature of the air?
The hum of electricity, the fabric against your skin, a myriad of conversations happening in the distance, a vast constellation of visual stimuli.
It's overwhelming when you actually stop and think about it.
If your conscious mind had to process every single piece of that data, your brain would instantly overload and shut down.
So how does it cope?
To prevent this, your brain employs a sophisticated filtering mechanism. It only allows a solitary spark of that infinite data to reach your conscious awareness.
And how does it decide what gets through the filter and what gets ignored?
It decides based on what you have convinced it is critical for your survival. And this goes back to our earlier discussion about cortisol versus elevated emotion.
Right, if you're stressed, you only see threat.
Exactly. When an individual operates in a state of perpetual fear, anxiety, or trauma, their system is flooded with survival chemicals. The filter is programmed to only look for threats.
So the brain is not looking for a serendipitous business opportunity.
Not at all. It is scanning for danger. But by practicing focused attention, conscious mental rehearsal, and deep gratitude, we shift our biology out of the survival spectrum and into the trust spectrum.
We flood the system with oxytocin and dopamine.
And when we do this while holding a clear intention, we do something remarkable to the filter.
What happens?
We assign a value tag to that intention. We communicate to the subconscious mind, this specific concept is of paramount importance to my existence.
And this activation heavily engages the salience network.
Cognitive bloodhound.
That is a perfect analogy. The salience network is your brain's bloodhound. Once it's given a target, a value tag, it begins scanning that infinite noise of the physical world for specific synchronicities, patterns, and opportunities that match your intention.
It pulls them out of the background noise and shoves them into your conscious awareness.
It is a universally experienced psychological phenomenon. Let's use the most common example. You decide you want to purchase a very specific, vibrant red vehicle.
Ah, the red car effect.
Yes. For your entire life leading up to that moment, you never really noticed red vehicles. They were just part of the background blur of traffic.
You'd pass hundreds of them and never log a single one.
Exactly. But the moment you make that decision, the moment you assign a value tag to that concept, suddenly you see an endless tide of red vehicles on every single road, in every parking lot, on every television screen.
So true. Did the universe suddenly manufacture thousands of red vehicles just for you?
Of course not.
The vehicles were always there, but your bloodhound wasn't tracking them. Your filter was deleting them from your reality because they held no value tag.
Right. They weren't important to your survival or your goals.
When you assign a value tag to a goal, let's say launching a new enterprise or finding a deeply fulfilling partnership, your salience network begins to highlight conversations, articles, people, and seemingly random events that align with that goal.
But here's where my skepticism kicks in again. I love the red car analogy, but how do we cross the monumental bridge from just noticing things to actually achieving something incredible?
That's the leap.
Right, because seeing a red vehicle is entirely passive. I can sit on a bench and watch red cars drive by all day. Doesn't mean I own one.
Very true.
Creating a radically new life requires bold action. How does the salience network translate into action?
You are identifying the exact point where most people falter. Noticing the opportunity is merely the opening of the door. Fearless action is the catalyst that propels you through it.
So the salience network reveals the opportunity, but your executive control network must be engaged to grasp it.
You have to walk through the door, often while terrified. Let me illustrate this with a narrative that perfectly encapsulates this transition from noticing an opportunity to taking fearless action against seemingly impossible odds.
Please, we need to see how this works in the crucible of real life.
Imagine a young student residing in the distant past who faced a monumental wall of academic rejection. This student aspired to enter a highly specialized, elite profession.
Okay, setting the stage.
However, their record of academic performance was, by all conventional metrics established by society, a profound failure. They were told by the gatekeepers of this profession that they were a statistical anomaly of the worst kind, a complete waste of institutional time.
Oh, wow. That is the ultimate external validation of unworthiness. Most people would take that rejection, internalize it, and let it become their permanent acoustic waveform. They would agree with the gatekeepers.
Indeed. It's so easy to just accept the label. And the climax of this struggle arrived when this student sat before a tribunal of highly intimidating gatekeepers who held the literal absolute power to destroy or grant the student's lifelong dream.
No pressure.
Right. The chief gatekeepers physically threw the student's file onto the table and spoke to them with absolute unmasked contempt. Now let us pause and look at the neurobiology of this moment.
Okay, what's happening internally?
A person operating in fear, dominated by cortisol, a person who had not mentally rehearsed their future, would have frozen.
Their prefrontal cortex would have shut down.
Exactly. They would have shrunk into the statistics, accepted the external reality as absolute truth, and walked away defeated.
Because their biology would have screamed, submit to the predator.
Exactly. But this student had embedded their intention deeply. They had spent a massive magnitude of time mentally rehearsing their desired reality. They had value tagged their vision.
Their internal baseline was tuned to certainty, not fear.
So what did they do when the file hit the table? How did they cross the bridge into action?
Yeah, what happened?
Instead of accepting the role of the victim, instead of allowing themselves to be reduced to a mere mathematical average on a piece of paper, the student asserted their profound humanity.
They refused to play the game on the gatekeeper's terms.
Exactly. They looked directly at the tribunal and refused to be objectified. For an extended duration, they did not argue their grades. They did not debate the statistics.
What did they do?
They spoke from a place of raw, unmasked human essence. They demonstrated such overwhelming authenticity, vulnerability, and undeniable inner truth that something miraculous happened to the gatekeepers.
What happened biologically to the gatekeepers?
The student's absolute authenticity triggered the mirror neuron system within the brains of the tribunal.
Mirror neurons.
Yes, they are a network of cells that fire both when an animal acts and when the animal observes the same action performed by another. It is the biological foundation of empathy.
So because the student was broadcasting a frequency of profound truth, devoid of any manipulation or fear, the acoustic waveforms they produced literally bypassed the cynical, logical filters of the gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers felt the student's conviction in their own bodies. These hardened evaluators were moved to tears. The previously locked doors flew open.
That's incredible.
The student was granted entry, defying every established rule and precedent of the institution.
That is the salience network meeting fearless action. The student saw the opportunity, the physical presence of the decision makers, the critical moment of judgment, and they engaged their executive function to act from a place of elevated emotion, not from a place of defensive fear.
Yes. And the ripple effect of that single action of authenticity was staggering. The passage of eras later, that same student, having achieved massive success in their field, became a foundational benefactor to that very institution.
Talk about a full circle moment.
They fundamentally altered its landscape for generations to come. The impossible was achieved not through magic, not through ignoring reality, but through the precise alignment of intention, elevated emotion, and the courage to take authentic action in the face of immense resistance.
Which brings us to a fascinating threshold in our exploration, because the actions we take in the physical world, like the student sitting before the tribunal, they aren't happening in a vacuum.
No, they're governed by larger forces.
Right. They are governed by universal forces that act flawlessly, reacting directly to the emotional resonance we have established. We are moving from a very individualized biological view,
The cells, the brain, the palm.
to a more macro universal mechanism of how human energy interacts with the fabric of reality.
We're discussing the critical transition from a fundamental sensory intellect to a multisensory perception of existence.
Define fundamental sensory intellect for me.
It's the mind that only trusts what it can immediately see and touch. It seeks to manipulate, control, and force the external world into submission.
It views life as a brutal zero-sum competition, like to gain something, another must lose it.
Exactly. But multisensory perception understands the profound, invisible interconnectedness of all things. It understands that we are operating within the uncompromising bounds of two governing dynamics.
The twin forces. Let's break them down clearly. The law of magnetic resonance and the law of cause and effect. Let's start with magnetic resonance.
The law of magnetic resonance dictates a simple but unyielding reality. Energy attracts like energy.
It's an uncompromising law of physics and psychology.
Yes, if your internal state, your neurobiological baseline, is tuned to fear, manipulation, arrogance, or deceit, and you step out into the world seeking success, you will invariably draw a vast constellation of individuals who are operating on that exact same frequency.
Because your filter, your salience network, is only looking for them and their filter is only looking for you.
Precisely. You will surround yourself with manipulators and fearful opportunists because that is the frequency you are broadcasting. The energy you emit is the exact energy you collect.
So if you build a business from a place of sheer paranoia, you will attract employees and partners who operate on paranoia.
And the structure will ultimately collapse under the weight of its own discordant frequency.
And the second force, the law of cause and effect. How does this move beyond just simple physics and into human experience?
This law is the universe's ultimate, inescapable message delivery system. Every single action you take, fueled by your underlying intention, sets a consequence into motion.
And here is the crucial element. When those consequences inevitably impact the lives of others, you will eventually experience the exact same emotional weight of what you caused them to feel.
It is the ultimate loop of accountability.
So, to use an analogy, if I act out of a fleeting moment of deep bitterness, or if I intentionally betray a colleague to advance my own career position, does the universe automatically stamp return to sender on that bitterness and mail it directly back to my doorstep?
With absolute, flawless precision.
Wow.
The universe is entirely impersonal.
Okay.
It does not judge you, it does not punish you or reward you in a moralistic, punitive sense. It simply reflects.
It just holds up a mirror.
Exactly. If you mail out a package of betrayal will be delivered to you. You may not recognize the wrapping paper. It might not come from the specific person you betrayed.
It might arrive eras later from a completely unexpected source.
In a totally different area of your life. But when you open that package, the emotional resonance inside will be identical. You will feel exactly the sting of betrayal you caused another to feel. It is the great unyielding teacher of responsibility.
That is heavy. It is a sobering thought, but it also contains an incredible, almost overwhelming sense of empowerment. It means we have absolute, total control over the packages we are mailing out into the world. There is a narrative that illustrates this psychological and energetic truth so beautifully about a traveler and a village elder. Can we walk through that? Because I think it grounds this abstract, almost cosmic law into a very understandable human perspective.
It is a profound, ancient narrative that perfectly encapsulates everything we have discussed about neurobiology, filtering, and resonance.
Set the scene.
Imagine a traveler journeying across a vast, unfamiliar landscape. They arrive at the outskirts of a new village. The traveler sees an elder resting by the path and stops to ask a vital question.
What do they ask?
They ask, "Tell me, what is the nature of the people who live in this village? Are they safe? Are they kind?"
And the elder.
The elder, possessing the deep wisdom of multisensory perception, does not answer directly. Instead, the elder answers with a question. What were the people like in the place you just left?
And how does the traveler respond?
The traveler scoffs, their face darkening with anger, and says, "They were harsh, unforgiving, bitter, and always looking to exploit one another. I was incredibly glad to leave that miserable place."
So they're carrying all that negativity with them.
Yes. The elder nods slowly, his face devoid of judgment, and replies, "I am sorry to tell you, but you will find the people in this village to be exactly the same."
Because the traveler is carrying the frequency of harshness and suspicion. Their internal filter, their salience network, is fundamentally primed to only seek out and interact with harshness.
Even if there are kind people in the village, the traveler will provoke them or simply fail to notice them.
Exactly. The traveler's biology is tuned to conflict.
Now, shortly after, a second traveler approaches the exact same village, sees the exact same elder resting by the path, and asks the exact same question. What are the inhabitants of this place like?
And the elder asks again, what were the people like in the home you left behind?
Right. This second traveler's face lights up. They smile warmly and say, "Oh, they were wonderful. They were loving, incredibly kind, quick to forgive, and deeply connected to one another. I was truly heartbroken to leave them."
What a different frequency.
And the elder smiles back, a genuine reflection of the traveler's warmth, and says, "Welcome. You will find the people in this village to be exactly the same."
The village didn't change. The architecture of reality didn't change. We do
Yeah.
not experience the world as it is. We experience the world as we are.
It is the ultimate, undeniable truth of magnetic resonance and neurobiological filtering. The external world is a neutral canvas. It possesses an infinite variety of colors and textures.
But it only takes on the specific colors of the emotional paint we throw upon it.
Precisely.
But this introduces a very painful, very complex contradiction for a vast majority of people listening right now. Because if the universe flawlessly mirrors who we are, what happens when the face we are presenting to the world is not our true face?
That is the core issue.
What happens when we have constructed a highly elaborate, meticulously maintained, socially acceptable mask? Because let's be honest, society demands the mask. It demands conformity.
This is perhaps the greatest tragedy of the modern human experience. We are taught to sever connection with our authentic selves very early in life.
We learn how to perform.
Many individuals master the mechanics of action. They learn how to manipulate the external environment, they learn the rules of the game, and they achieve a staggering magnitude of societal success.
They acquire the titles, the wealth, the status.
But they achieve all of it while pretending to be someone they fundamentally are not. They wear a heavy mask designed to appease the expectations of their parents, to impress their peers, to conform to rigid societal definitions of what success is supposed to look like.
I picture someone wearing this magnificent, incredibly ornate theatrical costume. It's heavy with jewels and embroidery, and they step onto the stage of life, and the crowd goes absolutely wild.
Everyone loves their performance.
They are receiving a standing ovation, showers of applause, massive financial compensation. But underneath all that heavy, suffocating fabric, the actor inside is starving for air.
That is the exact physiological and spiritual reality. When you operate through a mask, the universe and society delivers all the rewards to the mask.
The external world blesses the persona you've constructed.
But because the mask is an artificial construct, an energetic dead end, the authentic self hiding beneath it receives absolutely nothing. The true self remains starving, utterly empty, and completely devoid of peace.
This is why you see so many individuals who possess a vast constellation of material wealth and universal societal adoration, yet they wake up every single morning feeling entirely worthless.
They suffer from profound cognitive dissonance. Their biology is constantly stressed because maintaining a lie requires a massive amount of cellular energy.
It's exhausting.
None of the love or success truly belongs to them. It belongs to the character they invented.
The biological cost of inauthenticity. Your cortisol is constantly spiking because you're terrified the mask will slip and people will realize you are a fraud. So how do we dismantle the mask?
It takes courage.
In a world of deafening noise, of endless obligations where our devices are constantly demanding our attention, and society is constantly screaming at us to be more productive, more conventional, more palatable, how do we even begin to hear that quiet, authentic inner voice? How do we find our baseline truth?
To find true alignment, we must be willing to sit in the absolute silence of our own truth. We must systematically strip away the decades of conditioning.
How far back do we have to go?
We have to mentally return to the dawn of our youth. Think back to a time before society instructed you to be practical, before the educational system taught you to fear failure, before you learned that your worth was tied to your productivity.
What were the unfiltered passions that ignited your joy?
What were the activities you pursued with effortless, timeless devotion simply because they made your soul feel incredibly light? That joy is not childish, it is the ultimate compass.
That is where your biological truth resides.
And reclaiming it requires the profound courage to honor the inner whisper of intuition, even and especially when it defies all conventional logical sense.
We have a narrative that perfectly captures this terrifying leap of faith. It's the story of someone dropping the mask completely, stepping into the absolute unknown, and surrendering to that quiet whisper of intuition.
Yes, consider the deeply moving narrative of an individual whose physical vessel was severely, mysteriously failing.
Their body was shutting down.
They were enduring immense chronic physical pain that baffled conventional medical science. Their immune system was essentially attacking itself. They were steadily losing their mobility, their clarity of vision, their very autonomy.
They had explored every logical external avenue for a cure and found nothing.
They had reached the absolute devastating edge of human physical and emotional endurance.
So what did they do?
In a moment of total solitary despair, stripped of all ego, pretense, and the desire to control the outcome, this individual made a quiet, desperate vow to the universe.
A vow of surrender.
Yes. They said, if I am healed, I will surrender completely. I will stop fighting for what I think I'm supposed to be. You can have me.
It was a total relinquishing of the illusion of control, the ultimate dropping of the mask.
A profound biological and spiritual surrender. Following this vow, a radical shift occurred. The individual felt an intuitive pull to completely transition their physical nourishment.
They changed how they ate.
They moved entirely to a state of plant-based harmony, completely eliminating the inflammatory inputs they had previously consumed. And within a very brief cycle of time, a miracle of neurobiology and the gut-brain axis occurred.
The inflammation vanished.
The intense chronic inflammation that had plagued them for eras simply vanished. Their body regenerated, the pain evaporated.
But the true, ultimate test of their surrender came immediately after the physical healing.
Because healing the body is only step one. Now you have to live the life.
Exactly. An inner whisper, a quiet but undeniable intuitive directive, told them to begin broadcasting their joyful, authentic self to the digital ether.
They felt a profound urge to share their journey, their joy, and their newfound harmony with the world.
And we have to emphasize how utterly terrifying this was because it made zero logical sense for them at the time. They had previously aspired to be a very serious, dramatic, highly respected performer in a very rigid industry.
Right, an industry with very strict rules.
The conventional wisdom of that industry dictated that frivolous digital broadcasting, sharing joyful, unpolished videos, was absolute career suicide.
It was a guaranteed way to never be taken seriously by the gatekeepers ever again.
Precisely. The five-sensory intellect, the logical brain concerned with survival and status, screamed at them to ignore the whisper. It argued that they had almost zero audience, a mere fragment of followers, and absolutely no logical path to financial success.
It told them they were going to ruin their reputation.
But remembering their absolute vow of surrender, they obeyed the intuition. They consciously chose to drop the heavy mask of the serious, struggling artist.
They stopped trying to project an image of what they thought people wanted to see, and they simply presented their most authentic, unpolished, radiantly joyous self.
They shared their passion for their plant-based harmony with genuine, unfiltered enthusiasm.
It is the ultimate act of vulnerability. They essentially closed their eyes while walking down the incredibly long, uncertain corridors of their life.
They just trusted the unseen currents to guide them, regardless of what their logical, terrified brain was demanding they do.
And let us examine the phenomenal manifestation that followed the surrender. By abandoning the mask, their neurobiology fundamentally shifted.
They were no longer broadcasting the acoustic waveforms of desperation, fear, or the need for approval.
They were broadcasting a frequency of pure, unadulterated authenticity and joy. And because the universe operates on the law of magnetic resonance, their broadcast magnetized a massive, unprecedented tide of global connection.
Out of the infinite noise of the digital world, their salience network and the networks of millions of others aligned.
A major global marketplace of nourishment recognize their authentic light. They were elevated to a massive platform.
An opportunity they could never, in 1,000 lifetimes, have manipulated or forced into existence through sheer grinding effort alone.
Because they finally had the courage to show up as their true, unmasked self, the universe was finally able to deliver the specific blessings that were uniquely meant for them.
Okay, let's step back and look at the sheer breathtaking scale of what we have explored today. We have traversed a massive landscape.
We really have.
We started in the microscopic neurobiology of our emotions, looking at the hypothalamus, neuropeptides, and epigenetic expression. We moved into the filtering systems of the brain, the salience network, and how we literally perceive opportunity.
And we expanded out into the macro mechanics of universal laws, resonance, and the profound power of authentic action.
And the overwhelming synthesis of all of this information is deeply, profoundly empowering. We are not just fragile passengers drifting helplessly in a random, chaotic, and cruel cosmos.
We are not victims of circumstance. We are the active, conscious architects of our entire experience.
Exactly. We possess this incredible soft technology of our biology. We wield the acoustic power of our words, backed by the chemical conviction of our beliefs, to shape the realities of those around us.
We generate the emotional magnetism of our hearts to draw experiences toward us.
And when we align all of that, the biology, the words, the emotion, with the unyielding, courageous truth of our authentic selves, we literally sculpt the physical reality around us. We stop fighting the river, and we learn to direct the current.
The magnitude of human potential is staggering. We are barely scratching the surface of what is biologically and energetically possible when an individual becomes fully coherent.
When their deeply held thoughts, their elevated emotions, and their fearless actions are perfectly, seamlessly aligned.
Imagine a global reality where the overwhelming majority of people realize this power. Imagine if, instead of operating from a baseline frequency of fear, bitter competition, and biological scarcity, Humanity collectively decided to step out of the shadows of their inherited, painful stories.
Imagine if we all had the courage to drop the heavy, suffocating masks we wear for societal approval.
And began intentionally causing an effect of profound love, radical innovation, and boundless creation. The shift in our global reality would be instantaneous and unfathomable.
We triumph in this life not by fighting the darkness, not by forcing the external world to submit, but by fearlessly, joyously living the absolute highest version of our innate human divinity.
It is a massive responsibility to accept that level of power, but it is also the ultimate defining freedom of the human experience.
We are holding the pen, and the pages of the future are entirely blank. So as we conclude this thorough analysis today, I want to turn this directly back to you, the listener.
The ball is in your court.
We have established, through biology and psychology, that the external environment is a flawless, uncompromising mirror. It reflects exactly what you broadcast. So as you move forward from this moment, take a long, unflinchingly honest look at your life.
Look at the quality of your relationship.
Look at the trajectory of your career. Look at your daily level of internal peace and the vitality of your physical body. If your external world is a flawless mirror of your internal state, what is the reflection staring back at you right now, gently but firmly asking you to change?